Good morning. Welcome to session 5 of this year's Indonesia update. The topic is governing the urban environment in Indonesia. My name is Phil Cummins. I'm from the ANU. I'm actually from the Research School of Earth Sciences. Been asked to chair the session and to chair it with ruthless efficiency. So I'll try not to waste too much time. We have 3 speakers this morning: Yogi, Setya, Permana from Leiden University and BRIN, and also Muhammad Halley Yudhistira, who thankfully is known as goes by Yudhis, from Universitas Indonesia, and Nur Azizah from the ANU. So, since we really want to stay on time, without further ado, I will introduce the first speaker, and that is Yogi, going to be talking about flood management in Indonesia. Yeah. Over to you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you. I'm very glad to be back at the ANU. Thank you to Pak Ed Aspinal, Mbak Linda, and Indonesia Project for having me here. And for this update, I would like to present my research about the political economy of flood management in Indonesian cities. Government officials everywhere, Global South and Global North, usually blame their poor flood management because of the climate change. They mainly argued that the existing pumping machine, retention ponds, and drainage channels could no longer handle the overflow of surface water because of the extreme rains. I acknowledge that the failure of the flood management in some cities might be impacted by these non-political factors, such as engineering or machine failure. However, from my finding, it seems that it hasn't conveyed all of the explanation of the causes of the success and failure of flood management outcomes. So I'm using the flood defense infrastructure as an entry point of analysis. I compare the political dimension in flood management in 3 Indonesian cities. Indonesia is one of the most disaster-prone countries globally, frequently exposed to various geophysical and climate-related hazards. The increasing sea surface temperature contributed to the tropical cyclone intensity. Hydrometeorological hazards, such as landslide, floods, and tropical cyclone, are predicted to be more frequent in the future. Last year, floods was the most frequent type of natural disaster in Indonesia. So flood cases have shown increase in intensity over the previous decade. So while geophysical disaster like earthquake have caused more death in Indonesia, flood is the most significant among these risks because it occurs most often, affect most people, and causes most damage, especially in urban areas. So this research has this kind of question behind puzzles. However, although this flood happens in many areas, many cities, but some cities relatively succeed, and while others fail to manage floods, as shown by the statistic of flood cases and number of impacted people. So how is it possible that cities operating within the same national context and confronted with a very similar problem of floods, but perform very differently in terms of the outcomes of flood management? And it becomes even more puzzling when we observe that cities that do not heavily invest in massive technical intervention turns out equally well or even better than cities that depend on such intervention. So the answer must lie in the local politics of flood management. But what are these? So I would like to argue that the outcome of flood defense is also influenced by the existing political process. In this regard, existing power structure and ongoing political process play a crucial factor in shaping the city's ability to cope with floods. The success and failure of flood management depend on the varying regulatory enforcement capacity of local governments to set up and implement effective regulation of flood defense infrastructure. Local government whose policies regularly undermined by collusive relationship between state actors and economic elites are much less effective in building flood defense, especially through the effective management of drainage channels and waterways. and the opposite way, that local governments that are able to tame or bypass such this collusive relationship are relatively better to build effective flood defense. So before I explain further about the findings, I should explain first about the nature of Indonesia flood defense infrastructure. So flood defense infrastructure in Indonesia relies on the assemblage of drainage system and waterways, as you can see in this picture. Flood defense infrastructure is a facility to maintain surface water flow through drainage channels to minimize the overflow that leads to the flood hazard. The flood defense here refers to not only drainage facilities that built by the government, such as canals, retention pond, and pumping station, but also the drainage facilities built by large private companies like real estate companies and factories as part of their responsibility, which usually connected to this public infrastructure. In Indonesia, the authority to manage drainage channels lies on the hands of local government. So their authority, including regulating the provision of drainage infrastructure by private actors to ensure the optimal operation of drainage network. For the case selection, I combined flood case statistic from the Indonesian disaster information data from the BNPB and EU Global Surface Water to find cities that show flood trace intensity in the last 50 years, but show different trend in the last 10 or 15 years. Also, coastal and inland watershed is taken also into consideration because mostly Indonesian cities are located in this geographical setting. So, as you can see in this graph, Bandung and Semarang built many big infrastructure projects which cost hundreds of million euros in the last 10 or 15 years, compared with Surabaya. But, however, Surabaya shows impressive performance, as shown by low level of flood cases and low number of impacted people. In comparison, Semarang and Bandung show less impressive performance, as shown by high level of flood cases and high number of impacted people, although already equipped by installed large infrastructures. Bandung, in comparison with Surabaya, not only has invested very big sum of money in flood management infrastructure, but also invested in terms of human capacity, particularly through the deployment of security forces to securing drainage channels and waterways. Because flood management in Bandung District, part of the national program based on Presidential Decree 2018, part of the Citarum Normalization Project. So, here we go. Based on the field of findings, the decline in flood case in Surabaya in line with the enforcement of regulation on drainage system usage by the local government. They don't hesitate to take action against violations that occur, even if they should confront a big business group. Sometimes the real estate managers, especially those owned by the large property tycoon, reluctant to give access to check the drainage system. However, through the flooding task force, the Surabaya government always insists to entering the real estate area to inspect the existing drainage system. To delve deeper what is going on in the field, I followed Surabaya Flooding Task Force day by day. It is a street-level bureaucrats that responsible to manage the flood hazard. From the very first day, he warned me that his work's mainly 20% technical and 80% rest is non-technical. So my question is, what is the 80% non-technical? So it's like this. Yeah, this short video just only would like to illustrate what's going on in the field. This is owned by one of the biggest real estate property in Indonesia, one of the oligarch, and as you can see, they didn't build proper retention pond. Maybe they just only built like a fish pond, right? Very small and very shallow. So this person inspected the real estate, and then asked to the manager to wider and deeper these ponds. And their team will oversee the improvement day by day, and people keep following their works by the digital application. So that's done. And however, this kind of situation that happens in Surabaya, I couldn't find in other cities like in Semarang. Semarang government seems not seriously committed to enforce drainage regulations. Based on fieldwork findings, property companies in Semarang tend to refrain from fulfilling obligation to build and maintain drainage facilities as required by regulation. However, the Semarang government seems reluctant to confront big property companies. They showed relatively less effort to impose regulation against the property companies. Thus, the existing public drainage system cannot accommodate surface water from the housing built by the real estate companies. The expectation for serious effort toward enforcing regulation are increasingly pessimistic when the highest level bureaucrats hesitate to deal with these companies. It's because they usually have strong political economy position and access. Big real estate developers often break the rules, such as not creating retention pond as required, and it makes the people, kampung people who live outside of the real estate compound much more vulnerable from the flood hazard. As you can read from this quotation from high ranking of one of the local agency leader in Semarang. And also, apart from the real estate developers, industries and factories have also violated drainage on the Citarum river banks. Weak regulatory enforcement from the local government regarding violation of the drainage system committed by industry also occurs in the Bandung district. To delve further about what actually happens in the ground, I followed community-based river patrol in Bandung district. They admitted that they were often intimidated by other state actors when monitoring factories suspected of dumping industrial waste on the river. There were also rumors that Oknum from the local government were colluding with factory owner. Industrial waste without proper processing disposed to the Citarum River networks contributes to the river turbidity. This river turbidity is one of the factors that trigger the river overflow when the heavy rains happens. Now, explaining the variation. From the empirical findings, cities whose local governments are relatively capable of enforcing regulation on drainage-based infrastructure, such as Surabaya, shows better outcomes on flood cases and number of impacted people than cities that less enforce the regulation, like Semarang and Bandung district. However, regulatory enforcement seems more complex than the default formula of mainstream state capacity measurement. It includes the question of how we can explain the region within the state that lack of capacity element can enforce regulation. Indonesia is a middle economic country with a weak regulatory capacity, as shown by the worldwide governance assessment. In Southeast Asia, Indonesia's score is lower than Malaysia and Singapore. Indonesia on par with countries such as Thailand and Philippines. First explanation, the Surabaya case represents what scholar calls as a co-produce enforcement. This term explains that state-society linkage improve regulatory enforcement. It is when we can find greater resources within state and progressive linkage between regulators and allies in the society. So the bureaucrats can use societal resource to supplement the state. This combination leads to the pattern of named co-produce enforcement. Second, lack of enforcement is not always caused only by the lack of state capacity. Not enforcing the law can also reflect the political choices by bureaucrats or politicians due to its potential benefits. The local political character in Semarang and Bandung district share a conducive environment for what scholars call as a forbearance. I will explain to the next slide. As we already discussed yesterday with Pak Mustafa, I will start first with Surabaya. The state-society linkage is the main feature of Surabaya reform under Mayorisma. The linkage is crucial in the regulatory enforcement of flood defense. Where civil society is engaged in local governance, the government apparatus cannot easily collude with companies for violating drainage regulations. Moreover, a government that receptive a broader popular base can be more responsive to the needs of larger segment of society. In the case of Surabaya, the mayor mobilized against corruption by strengthening relationship with civil society actors and reformist leaders, and with the help of media to help broaden her base. This reform agenda resulted in a more effective, more just, and less expensive response. This coalition can limit the influence of predatory elites, including political business collusion, until the present day when Risma is no longer serving as mayor. Through the developed digital application, such as this developed by one of very influential local media in Surabaya, Suara Surabaya, the public could complain about city problems by uploading photos, text, videos directly to the Suara Surabaya mobile app. And every complaint that Suara Surabaya channel receive can be directed directly to the Surabaya government 112 command control. So this directly go to the city hall. And the public could also monitor and follow up the improvement by the city government by reporting it via videos or photo. In the case of flooding, residents could report inundation and directly monitor the follow-up carried out by street-level official in the field. So the street-level bureaucrats who responsible to floods cannot cannot just, they should showing serious commitment to respond to the floods. Public monitoring like this contribute to securing the city government commitment to serving the public seriously. Yeah. In the opposite way, the reluctance to enforce drainage regulations in Semarang is not because of the problems of financial posture or workforce from the bureaucracy, but because it seems more to collusion between the politician and business actors. Semarang is the fourth largest city and relatively sufficient local budget and well-equipped bureaucracy. But with non-enforcement actions, politicians get material resources such as funding to win competitive election. As you can see in this picture, there's a rumor that the elected mayor has entangled in the controversy since his first term administration in 2014. Civil society actors regretted the mayor inauguration because it was suspected that he received illicit campaign funds. The rumor has it that some businessmen donated but were not included in the campaign finance report. They provide assistance in the campaign, such as facilitating transportation for the campaign supporters. For example, this company is suspected of being one of the campaign fund contributor for the elected mayor. This company several times involved in the violating drainage regulation related to the business activities, but was not subjected to the strict sanction by the local government. And Bandung similar also happens non-enforcement is in line with the political interest of the dynasty that survived for 2 decades. And there was a rumor that this dynasty used to receive money from factories and industry owners operated in the Citarum watershed. They receive funding from business actors to distribute resources to their supporters to win election. Moreover, in the Bandung district case, the arrival of another actor like the security forces, made collusion difficult to be contained. Okay, to be concluded, I just only would like to highlight that the flood is not only a natural cause. Flood also heavily connected with the political dimension. So the successful outcome of flood defense infrastructure is not only caused by the technical performance, like engineering infrastructure and so on, but it's also determined by the state or local government capacity to enforce drainage regulation. More regular collusion for violating drainage regulation occur, so the less successful the flood defense outcomes will be. And conversely, if collusion occurs less frequently, then most likely the flood defense will be more successful. This study also proposed to rethink the mainstream understanding of flood defense infrastructure in the flood risk management toolbox that now amplified by the EU. Infrastructure for flood defense means not only refers to massive facilities such as canals or pump stations that built by the state, but more as a complex assemblage of interconnected different elements from public, private, or state and non-state domains. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. That was perfect timing. And there'll be a 30-minute question and answer session at the end of this session. So please hold your questions. And with that, we will move on to the next talk, which is Pak Yudhis on traffic policy responses to traffic congestion.
Thank you, Pak Will. Okay, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Indonesia Update, Pak Ed and Bu Linda for bringing me here. But the topic is quite heavy because it's about traffic congestion. And I would like to use Jakarta as the lesson for my study now. See, someone is laughing now. Okay, first of all, I would like to put the context about the Jakarta metropolitan area. Oh, sorry. So I think most of you guys already know about Jakarta. Jakarta is the largest metro area in Indonesia, but perhaps you may not know about how big is Jakarta. Jabodetabek or Jakarta metropolitan area is about 31 million people living there. I think more than Australia, 26 or 27 people. And then, these 31 million people living in only 11,000 kilometers square. So you can imagine that. And the size of Jakarta metropolitan area is about 5 times of the Bandung metropolitan area. So imagine that Jakarta is something like a primate city. It's much bigger than the second largest metro area in Indonesia. And then in the context of Jakarta, in terms of national economy, we can see that Jakarta is much more prosperous. In the context of the GDP per capita is much higher compared to Indonesia. 1 out of the 10 people in Indonesia living in Jakarta metropolitan area, indicating massive demand for transportation. And we know that on average in 2014 survey, commuter survey in Jakarta, on average people need like 21.3 kilometers or about 64.6 minutes on average for commuting. Someone yesterday complaining about having commuting for 12 minutes in here, but in Jakarta, 64 minutes needed for one way. So for a return trip, you need 2 hours, and it's on average. And then the number slightly decreasing, just 5%, but the cost is increasing, partly because perhaps for the rise of the ride-hailing service. Later we can see. And to put it in the context in the other urban areas in the world, Jakarta is like 9th most congested city in Asia. Maybe some of you argue, no, maybe not 9th. And then in ASEAN, it is only second to Manila. By TomTom traffic index, it stated that about 22 minutes and 40 seconds to pass first 10 kilometers in Jakarta city. And I believe that some of you may not believe it. 10 kilometers in 20 minutes, come on. It may be 1 hour, in even more during the peak hour. And then even maybe Jakarta is not 9th most congested city, maybe second, but it's just because of the COVID, maybe it's better. So if you want to see Jakarta in the best way in terms of commuting around, then come during the COVID. And then the cost of traffic is about 100 trillion rupiah per year, so you can imagine that the traffic is really bad in Jakarta. So why the congestion is so severe in the Jakarta metropolitan area? First, I would like to highlight how bad the congestion Jakarta is. On average, 1/4 of the commuter spends more than 90 minutes to commute for one trip by 2019. So on this number means that you need at least 3 hours for a return trip from your home to your working place. I myself spend 3 hours return from Pamulang to Salemba every day. Okay. Yeah. Same with Mas Mustafa for sure. And then this number is far away from other other city like Surabaya, Bandung, and Medan, but still, I think those areas, Surabaya, Bandung, Medan, still even worse compared to Canberra, for instance. So even though the other cities number is much less, but I believe that without proper measure to reduce congestion, I think the path will be go something like Jakarta metropolitan area nowadays. Why this happen? Standard theory say that for sure demand and supply imbalance make this happen in Jakarta. For the table, we can see that the ratio of network length for population, both rail and road, Jakarta is way behind the other megacities. Put it in the context, Jakarta having population like 31 million. Let's say we compare it with Greater Tokyo, 32 million. But our railways is just 1/4. Our station is just less than 10%. And then ridership for these railways is much low compared to Greater Tokyo. I think if we scrutinize the number more, our number is still slightly better than Metro Manila. Still, Bangkok is still much better than us. And then, we also see that at the demand side, per capita income growing rapidly in Indonesia and mostly driven by Jakarta and other metros. Now people easily buy motorcycles. The down payment is so low, almost sometimes it's like 1/10 of the regional wage. And then there is also lower end cars like LCGCs, used car, and so forth. Then people easily to access the private modes. And the last, this trend makes massive change in the modal split since early 2000s. I believe if you come in Jakarta like 20 years back, you see that you see something like what we have in this flyer. There are many Kopaja and so on. There is no Kopaja at all now in Jakarta. People shift from Kopaja in early 2000 now either using motorcycles or Gojek or ride-hailing services. And then, do this trend only concentrated in Jakarta? Apparently no. We see that this trend also happened in the other cities like Surabaya, Bandung, Medan. More people relying on motorcycles. 50% people commute using motorcycles. So now if you see the road in Jakarta, Medan, and Surabaya, many people keep using motorcycles with, I don't know how to say it. If they find macet, they use lawan arah, using the other part of the road, making another chaos. And then we also see that the share of public transit users is relatively low, indicating that the lack of public transit investment. Now, we see that public bus is no longer option. What I mean in public bus here, like Kopaja and so on, the conventional public bus. In Jakarta, the share is declining over time. The percent of Transjakarta users increase, but the share of other minibus, the conventional one, plummeting. Why? Because of the bus itself, the service is getting lower and lower. Schedule is, there is no schedule. The service, unreliable service frequency, maybe you know ngetem, and then, and then the less people using it, the more ngetem they are. And then we also see that the substitute modes is getting lower, the cost is getting lower. Motorcycle is cheaper, and then in the last couple of years, we see that more people using the ride-hailing service. So people reluctant to use the bus because of that the waiting time is so long, and this ride-hailing service work as the complementary product for public transit, particularly for the Transjakarta network. But is it Jakarta is so desperate? But in the couple years, at least in the last decade, we see that the public transport investment in Jakarta is started. So there is a improvement in public transport in a way that we have BRT starting for 2004, covering 244 kilometers, and I think now carrying more than 1 million passengers daily. There is also improvement in commuter line. MRT just opened by 2019, but unfortunately is only serving like 16 kilometers from Lebak Bulus to Bundaran HI. There are another 3 phases undergoing from construction now. The phase 2 is under construction, but another is still on planning process. And we just opened the LRT Jabodetabek 2 weeks ago. So maybe some of you follow the news. Okay. On the commuter line, I don't know whether some of you perhaps experienced with using the commuter line in the top left. But in early 2000, we can easily see that the commuter line is so overcrowded. But by the end of 2000s, the Ministry of Transportation tried to renovate this by having better service, switching the manual ticket to automatic gate ticketing. Somehow it reduced the issue of pickpocketing in a commuter line. And then there is also construction of double track, improving adding more coaches, so it improved the quality of routes and stations, and increase the frequency as well as the headway. And then another thing is Transjakarta, the TJ, Transjakarta. So for sure, it's better compared to the conventional bus. It has 14 main corridors operated, as well as feeder system connected to the SAM area in the Jabodetabek. But there is issues also because this Transjakarta, the BRT, use existing roads. So in early project, some of the line use the existing road capacity up to 50% and create another traffic jams in Jakarta. So, but at the same time, I think, I don't know, but Jakarta's, Indonesia, especially in Jakarta, people love to build the highways. So in the last decades, since 2010, we built another 145 kilometers, almost double from the 78 until 2000 development. Basically, this development mainly built by the central governments. The local government contribute none, and it's easy to build relative to other public transport like MRT. Profitable, people pay the lanes, and then in contrast for public transport, maybe the revenue is not there, and at the same time, institutionally it's less complicated compared to, let's say, having PPP for public transport like MRT. But having this more and more highways, particularly the Jakarta Outer Ring Road 1 and 2, people now moving to the suburbs, creating suburbanization process, sprawling, and at the same time brings congestion in the suburbs. So in 2000, the congestion is centered in the Jakarta area, but now it's like everywhere. And at the same time, I think the government also seems to be more focused on the demand policy. Some of you may be quite familiar with 3-in-1, high occupancy vehicle, so that you cannot pass the line except you carry at least 3 passengers in your car. It was started like from 92 and abolished by 2016 because of its inefficiency. There is jockey that you can hire along the road, and then you pay the jockey. And then it was lifted. It was lifted, replaced by odd even policy in 2016. Yeah, there is evidence that the policy reduced congestion, improving the travel time, but the effect relatively small. There is issue also that the nature of the policy is local, only improving some major roads, worsen congestion in other roads, and then at the same time people buy more car. Okay, so when suddenly people ask, so what is the solution? That's the most difficult part, I think. Okay, well, I want to start with the there are many potential explanation on the potential solution, but maybe I should start with the institutions. I think one of the speakers yesterday talked about that how Jakarta metropolitan area is so fragmented in terms of the institution. We have 14 districts in Jakarta, but at the same time, people move between the administrative borders. Consequently, we have different government, different interests, and then and there is a tendency that solving on transport problems within their administrative area may create other issues. And at the same time, we cannot compare the capacity, financial capacity among these districts. So Jakarta perhaps can generate much more money compared to Tangerang, compared to Depok, or even Bogor. And because this lacks coordination, there is tendency that is administrative trying to solve its own own transportation issue. Bogor City, I don't know whether Pak Bima is not here. Okay, fine. Okay. Okay. Pak Bima tried to revive the dead BRT system by having cooperation with the Ministry of Transportation, but only with 4 corridors. Bekasi will follow on using BTS system, only small corridors. And Tangerang also wants to use another 4 corridors using the BRT. But given the size of, let's say, Bogor or Tangerang, we don't think that this type of bus will solve the congestion problem, let's say, in Bogor or Tangerang. So the solution is practically limited. And then another issue is that now there is no minimum service standard for the transportation, giving that the municipality can define how their policy toward the transportation or their own traffic congestion issue within their administrative area. But at the same time, we can see that if we are late to invest in public transport, the cost going to be much higher in the next future. So solving this perhaps need multi-phase strategies. Rethinking the institutional setup can be a starting point. There is possibility that we may solve, the order might be slightly wrong. So perhaps having metropolitan area authorities may ease the intergovernmental cooperation to provide urban service, particularly those who touch urban service that beyond the administrative areas like urban transport. So to do so, what the government can think about having the local public company as a way, as the follow-up from these metropolitan area authorities. This company or Perumda can serve as the key factor and the key actor in executing infrastructure projects. So coordination can be works between Perumda and Metropolitan Authority as well as with the lining ministry, so that they can join to build like new massive public transports. And then along with the metropolitan area authorities, the central and the government, local government can be shareholder of this Perumda. And then the deepening source of financing can be another issue, so that financing can be the issues, so that promoting private sector involvement can be one way to promote better public transport in Jakarta or even other metro area in Indonesia. So the government, the Ministry of Finance develop various facilities to attract more public-private partnerships in Indonesia, from project development facility until availability payment. And at last, I think the government should also think how to maximize the land value capture, because once an area is built by the public transport, then they will the area will get higher price in the land, so that how to capture it, how to internalize it should be one of the key factors to mobilize the revenue. Okay, maybe I think I skip this. So remarks. So to end my presentation, we should manage our expectations. Yeah, so why I want to show this slide, because even big cities and in the developed countries like London or Paris, they face congestions. So improving mobility does not mean we will see that dramatic change from Jakarta to Canberra, for instance. It never happened. Forget about it. Okay. But I think having better mobility for sure will provide more options for people, better improving in quality of life. People don't waste their time too much in the traffic congestion in the road, but perhaps they can spend more time like in the productive life. And so the slides, so that sufficient supply doesn't mean that we have no congestion. Maybe congestion shifting from road congestion to railway congestion, like we have in Tokyo. So in the morning peak, we will face like full body contact activity with the other people. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm sorry for taking too much minutes, perhaps because of the congestion. Thank you.
That was perfect timing, Patrice. Thank you. Okay, so this is the last talk of the session by Ibu Azizah from ANU on governing garbage. So it should be very interesting. Thank you. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session, especially because this is very early in the morning and it is still in the weekend. I left my house, my kids still sleeping. And most importantly, thank you to Pak Ed and Mbak Linda for giving me this opportunity to share my research. And also thanks to the committee and volunteers for managing this event really well. And thank you, Pak Phil, for chairing this session. So after listening to the flood and also traffic problem, I will bring you to another problem in the city, waste problem. So I will present my research on governing garbage, solid waste management reform in Surabaya city. So it's been a very popular city in the last 2 days in this Indonesia update. So here are the Indonesian waste pack in 2021. Waste is a huge problem in Indonesia. Waste generation in that year was more than 34 million tons. And if you look at the managed waste rate, it seems high, almost 65%. But this actually mostly means that the waste is transported and piled up in the landfill without treatment, creating mountainous garbage. I believe not many of you have visited landfill to see garbage mountains. Whereas unmanaged waste pollutes the environment. Some of the waste goes to the rivers and oceans. And based on Jambek research in 2015, Indonesia produced around 1 million metric tons of plastic debris per year, which ended up in the oceans, in the Indonesian oceans. And as the data covers only 289 regions, this means that the real waste problem is much bigger. Then, how do cities manage waste in Indonesia? Waste management is one of the decentralized authorities from the national government to local government. Therefore, its cities respond differently to this duty. In general, local government's capacity to govern waste is still low because of, one, the absence of trained officials and under budget. And second, the lack of infrastructure and poor environmental awareness worsening the situations. Third, as I mentioned earlier, most waste in Indonesia is brought to the landfill without any treatment, such as waste separation and covering with soil regularly, leachate control, and so on. Therefore, this creates further problems, that is overcapacity and waste avalanche, for example. A catastrophic waste avalanche happened in 2005 in Lewi Gajah landfill in West Java province, which killed around 140 people who depended on waste as their source of income, such as waste pickers and villagers who live near the landfill. And please look in these pictures that represent common waste problem at the landfills in many regions in Indonesia. The picture I took from Sindo News illustrates what has just happened at Sarimukti landfill, a landfill in West Java province that serves as the final dumping site for 4 regencies and cities, including Kota Bandung. There were garbage fire for almost 2 weeks last month. Another picture relates to Yogyakarta waste emergency, which happened a few times due to problem at Piulngan landfill. And recently, the provincial government closed the one and only final dumping site for Yogyakarta city for 1.5 months. This closure caused waste to pile up everywhere in the city, as you can see here. And this is, by the way, my city. And now, let me introduce you to Surabaya city. With population around 3 million in 2020, the city dwellers produce more than 2,000 tons of waste per day, in which 1,400 to 1,600 tons of waste dumped at Benowo landfill, the only landfill in the city. In early 2000, the city had a waste crisis, almost similar to what happened in Bandung and Yogyakarta city. This waste crisis became the entry point to bring down the mayor at time, Sunarto or Anarto. And if you remember what Pak Mustafa presented yesterday, Mustafa, you helped me a lot, thank you. There were NGO activists behind this political dynamic. There was another waste crisis in 2010, in around 2010 and 2012, as Benowo landfill was over capacity. And however, I then found that there has been a continuous effort to govern waste in the city, which made this city receive so many national and international awards for city cleanliness. And this led me to a question, how the Surabaya city government governed the waste problem. Now I will show you the waste reforms efforts in Surabaya. These pictures, I took both at Pusat Daur Ulang, or Material Recovery Facility, at Kelurahan Jambangan. It was developed by a CSR program from PT Unilever in 2001. And later, the city government took over the management of this facility, including providing operational fund. There are 9 material recovery facilities in the city, which are able to reduce 40 to 50% of waste brought to this facility before the rest goes to the landfill. These pictures show part of waste service provided by the city government. The city government uses compactors, waste truck, they call it compactors like this, to collect and transport waste from temporary dumping sites, or TPS, and material recovery facilities to the landfill. Also, the government runs several composting houses to process organic waste and turn waste to compost. Then the government then uses the compost to fertilize public garden, and also the community can also take the compost for free. So it's kind of a circular economy here. And this green, clean, and well-managed public garden. It's not just usual public garden in Surabaya. Up to 2001, this garden, now called Taman Harmoni, was a landfill. Keputih landfill. So the landfill that caused the waste crisis in that year, then the government closed it, and then now they turn this, that landfill into this garden. In 2021, President Jokowi inaugurated the first waste-to-electricity facility in Indonesia, here at Benowo landfill. So started in 2012, after the second waste crisis, Benowo landfill, the one and only landfill in the city, has been managed under a public-private partnership with the build-operate-transfer model for 20 years. The private partner is PT Sumber Organik. In this partnership, the private sectors invest in the construction costs of the facility and then manage and operates the landfill, while the city government provides the land and pays tipping fees. That's the fees the government has to pay for dumping the waste at the landfill. The electricity produced in the process belongs to the private sectors and becomes part of the profit for the private sector. The company claimed that they are now producing 9 megawatt electricity per day. At the end of the contract period in 2032, the building and facilities will be handed over and become government asset. In this picture, you see people in orange shirt. They are part of Pasukan Kuning or Yellow Task Force, because initially the uniform in yellow color. They changed into orange. These task force were recruited as street sweepers to keep the street clean and other public areas in the city clean. The government has been recruiting street sweepers since 1987, and their wage paid by the government based on the minimum regional wage. So overall, Surabaya has been exemplifying best practice in waste management in Indonesia. The city receives like the Adipura Kencana, the highest rank in the Adipura Award, which was given to cities that can maintain city cleanliness and urban environmental management for 3 years in a row for several times, from 1992 to 2022. And only less than 10 cities in Indonesia had received the Adipura Kencana. And along with those awards, the city government also received so many international recognition for city cleanliness and green city, including from the United Nations Environment Program. Then what makes Surabaya city government able to manage urban waste? This is what I found in Surabaya. The first one is a continuous leadership commitment. Second, the commitment is then used to mobilize resources, both formal resources such as local budget, and informal resources, including alumni-based networks and rent-seeking. And third, a strong citizen participation and civic activism, as well as corporate social responsibility program from private companies in the area. I will explain those in the next slides. So leadership is one important variable in waste reform in Surabaya. You can see here a picture of Bu Risma. Are you from Surabaya, Pak? Yeah, so this picture is picture of Bu Risma, mayor in Surabaya in 2010 to 2020. And she was able to mobilize the bureaucratic machine and citizens to carry out various programs related to city cleanliness. Before becoming a mayor, she was a bureaucrat in the city, and she was the head of the city cleanliness agency for years. However, long before her term, the waste reform also happened in 1980s under Mayor Purnomo Kasidi. He's a military doctor who has concern on sanitation and environment program, including waste management. It was under his term when the Yellow Task Force was established. And long before that, during the Dutch era, the colonial government provided waste collection and transportation service. The second variable is the formal resources. That's the local budget. In the last few years, Surabaya allocates more than 400 billion rupiah per year. That includes budget for waste collection and transportation, tipping fees to PT Sumber Organik, and also honoraria for the yellow team and so on. The tipping fee is around 130 billion a year. And as comparison, in Yogyakarta city, my own city again, the government allocates only 9 billion rupiah per year to manage the landfill. And talking about waste revenue from waste levy and land rent, the government received 47 billion rupiah per year. Here you can see the huge gap between waste budget and waste revenue, which means that the government subsidy for waste service is big. Other resources available in the city is experts and alumni-based network, especially from the Technology Institute of Surabaya, or ITS, and Erlangga University. Those experts and academics have been working as consultants for the city government in designing and implementing waste reform in the city since 1980s. Also, lots of middle and upper level bureaucrats, including Bu Risma, are alumni of ITS. And this made the city government listen to what those experts say. As I quoted here, this quote refers to the waste reform at the landfill. Because the gasification, this is the technology used in the landfill to convert waste to electricity, and landfill processes have started, there has been an addition of a team from ITS. And look at the one with yellow alphabet here. Moreover, the city government said that what was said by ITS would be followed. Jadi, they just followed whatever the ITS experts said. That's good though. Another resource I found in the city is rent-seeking and patronage, which resulted in the lack of transparency in the procurement and budgeting for the landfill. So this is what happened around the procurement process for the landfill in 2009. So the procurement started in 2009, but no private company is interested. In 2011, the government opened the second procurement attempt in which four companies placed their bid. But then the winner was the PT Sumber Organik or PTSO that offered gasification technology to turn waste into electricity. This company offered the highest tipping fee compared to other competitors in the procurement process, yet PTSO won. However, the procurement team claimed that PTSO won as the technology that company offers is the best option in the effectiveness for waste reduction. There was suspicion from some local politicians and NGO activists about this process that prompted the Aliansi Masyarakat Anti Korupsi Surabaya to report the case to Anti-Corruption Committee. You can see here the tanda terima. The Surabaya police followed up on this report, but then the case was dropped to the insufficient evidence. However, up to today, there is still tug of war between the executive and legislative power in the budgeting for the landfill, especially to pay for the tipping fee. And now let's move on to the third variable. It's participation of the citizen, of NGO activists, and private companies through their corporate social responsibility. One of citizen participation in waste management is through waste bank or bank sampah. There are almost 300 waste bank in Surabaya, also one bank sampah Indo or central waste bank. And as you can see here in the picture, it represents a partnership between Bank Sampah Indo Surabaya and a CSR from PLN, the National Electricity Company. And as for the NGO activities, again, if we recall what was presented by Mustafa yesterday, he argued that civic activism was an important factor that drive political reform in Surabaya. This is also the case in waste reform in the city. Apart from those three variables, and now I have to thank to Pak Abidin Kusnau for lending the base when he explained about critical junctures. I found that awareness toward waste issue in the city has started in 1920s, in which the Dutch government introduced government waste collection and transportation service provision following the cholera outbreak in that era. In 2001, there was a waste crisis, which negatively affected the most of the residents. Later, the waste crisis sparked a mass movement to remove the current mayor, that mayor. Even though the waste crisis was not the only issue at the time, but this became a trigger point to bring down the mayor. And this became a public memory that waste is an important issue in Surabaya. And again, there has been a strong social movement as well as social capital in the city, including in waste management. And based on Surabaya city waste practices, I think the dynamics of waste governance in Surabaya show the different modes of governing chosen by the city government to address the waste problem. The choice of strategy is shaped by the national policy context, the objectives to be achieved, the scope of waste governance, the resources required, and the response of the community and other stakeholders to the government's waste policy. And looking at Surabaya waste reform, I noted 3 points that we need to reflect on. The first one is the fact that modernization at the landfill, or the waste to energy or to electricity, might be the future trend in Indonesian city. However, this will have an impact on the marginalization of informal waste actors, like waste pickers and intermediate waste buyers, those who have been taking important role in recycling waste in the landfill. So, what can we do to integrate the formal and informal waste system? Secondly, informal resources like corruption, rent-seeking, and alumni network might be a driving factor in pushing innovative policy to solve garbage problem. This form of informality provides resources for the government to develop and implement policy action toward garbage problem. Again, how can we study the impact of this form of informality in urban governance? What can we do about this? And lastly, despite current achievements in Surabaya waste reform, the Surabaya city government has been unable, actually, to reduce the waste generation volume. Most of the reforms are targeted to manage waste, not to prevent waste. If this continues, more resources will be needed to tackle waste problem. Therefore, we do need to think about what can we do about waste growth prevention policy, and what can we do to raise awareness in waste prevention. So this research helps me to realize that doing research relates to waste really need a strong nose. Especially if you need to gather data at the landfill, I did that many times, or to take picture behind the compactors like this. Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank the speakers for keeping to time. It really made my job easier. Thank you very much. They were all very interesting talks, and so that gives us 30 minutes for a question and answer session. Does anyone want to start off? We've got a question over here. I thought there was one over here. No? Oh, yeah, please. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks to all the speakers. I have a question for Bu Azizah. I was wondering, we often see waste management in cities in Indonesia intertwined with discourses around ketertiban. And I note, for example, Bu Risma, who's gotten a lot of really positive descriptions over the past couple of days, was involved in significant penggusuran and evictions of street traders. I'd wondered if you'd seen intersections between waste management and other forms of social management in cities, for example, dislocations of informal settlements and other such communities. Thank you.
Threes, okay. Okay, there was one over here, and there are couple of people here, Budi, and so we'll take this one over here first.
Hi, my name is Max. Thank you for all the speakers' presentations. They were wonderful. My question is also for Ibu Nur Azizah about the waste management. You mentioned briefly at the end that most of the management was precisely that, management of waste, but not really focused as much on prevention. And I was just wondering where a lot of this waste comes from in the first place. Like, are there global sort of waste transference factors at play? Or sort of how does that whole side of the issue play out?
Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the presentation. So it seemed to me that all the three speakers suggest if I look at this problem as a problem of common property, that the way to solve it is using government, good government, not government, but government, exactly, in which there is an alternative, isn't it, in theory, that we could actually assign to private sector. And it doesn't seem to me that you provide a room for a private sector, much bigger role in solving this issue of common property. Thank you.
Okay, so those are 3 questions. So we'll go to the answers, please. Azizah, okay.
Thank you for many questions for me. Pak Ian, so I will tell you a secret. Bu Risma did not like waste pickers. He did not like street vendors. He did not like those informal activity because it's totally not in alliance with city aesthetic. So what's the most important for Bu Risma is the city aesthetic, actually. That's why during the modernization of the landfill, he then evicted so many thousands of waste pickers from the area. And they were marginalized, they were put aside. Even at the Koputi landfill, the old landfill, there was actually thousands of waste pickers in the area before, but then they are gone now. Some of them, they still in Surabaya in the fringe area, but that's actually the case. So Bu Risma actually is so strict about city cleanliness, about greenery. Even she would call it Pak Lurah. If there is some RT, do not compete in a clean kampung competition for green and clean, for example. Or if there is the waste truck is not, the paint is quite faded away, and she saw that, she would just call the driver and ask, and on the spot, to just repaint the waste truck at that time. So that's for her. And for where the waste come from? It's from us. Come on, we produce waste. And based on research just recently, the city dwellers individually produce around 0.7 kilogram of waste per day. And that's the reality. That's the reality, and not many people aware that they are part of the problem. So then why? What's the role of the non-government? So actually, in my research, it's what I present today is only a small part of my research. For my bigger picture, I actually did my research on the interlinkage between formal and informal waste system, in which I also discuss about the role of informal waste system, for example, and like bank sampah, and so many actors that's actually involved. But I still have belief that the government is the duty bearer, because it's part of the decentralized authority. And yeah, if you are talking about resources to solve this problem, it's very big. So it's only the government who has that. Or even, of course, the government can have a partnership like what has been done in Surabaya, but to some extent, somehow, it actually, include rent-seeking, corruption, and this kind of informal resources. Thank you.
Okay, I think there was there are 2 questions on this side, so this fellow's been waiting quite a long time, I think. Can we do him first?
Yeah, we would like to respond to Pak Budi.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a bit more.
Pak Budi looking at you because yeah, okay. On the question from Pak Budi about why we don't see any or much involvement in private partnership or private entities, I think the case of transport, let's say for MRT, the way we build it is involving the private one, but I don't think our regulation don't have enough space for the private to entirely operate the system. Something like we will see in Tokyo, for instance. In Tokyo, we see many private. Why? Because their revenue is not depending on the ticketing, but the way they can manage to develop the surrounding area of the station. That's the part why the best part of this building of the public transport. In Indonesia, I think we don't have enough capacity, or I don't know whether, I'm not clear yet, but I think partly because of the undang-undang, regulation doesn't allow the private to have like a combining between work as the public transport entities and the developer around the station.
Oh yeah. Yeah, room for private actor. In the flood case, actually, that's this is maybe the origin of the problems. Why? Because based on the regulation on drainage, this happens in many cities in Indonesia, that the real estate property, when they conducted less use conversion, more than 5 hectares, they should build proper retention ponds and drainage channels to compensate the water absorption. But many times these big real estate properties, they hesitate to build this proper drainage. So it makes people that live in the outside kampung more vulnerable to the flood hazard. So I think the problem in flooding, it's because the facilities are not only responsible for the state to provide, but also for the private entities such as the real estate companies. And until today, many big real estate property hesitant to build the proper such facilities. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I did want to remind online participants that there is a Q&A box on Zoom, so you can submit questions through that. Can we just get this one fellow who's got the question? He's been waiting a long time, so we'll do that first.
Thank you. Yes, my name is James Julvan. I'm a G20 scholar from UNSW Sydney. And yes, this is very interesting. So maybe the question for Ibu Nur and Pak Yogi. So I came from Bandung, so I experienced the three problems that presented today, daily issues in Bandung. So you have shown us the best practice from Surabaya, which is good. But why is it so hard for other cities to replicate the same good approach to their problem, especially by the local authorities, maybe, because everyone knows that they also have done like the comparative study trip, like the studi banding trip. It's still frequent, but we have not seen like the improvement. So what is the main factor that prevent or make the other city have less maybe willingness and action to do the same like Surabaya? Thank you very much.
I think there was one other question on this side. And then we'll do the online ones. And, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Pak Phil. My question is actually really connected to the last one. So I am Eki, also from Bandung. I'm going to explain more, like specificity on the question. Like, I have a question, of course, for Mbak Nur especially. Thank you for your presentation, Mbak. It's not only interesting, but really relate to what is happening in Bandung. And also important, I think, because Bandung is so close from Jakarta, it's been tourist destination and also central government meetings destination, right? So garbage will always be a problem, and also traffic congestion, Mas Heli, in Bandung, right? As you probably know. So I think the first point, continuous leadership commitment, especially in Surabaya case. Surabaya had Bu Risma, right? So probably that's a very important thing, but we don't see anything like that in Bandung. As you know, our last mayor passed away, right? Bandung's last mayor passed away, replaced by the vice mayor who is now jailed, right? Because of corruption. Together with the top official of local transportation office, Mas Heli. So that will relate to the congestion, right? So we don't really see any solution for Bandung. it does not really good, right? And then we have a temporary mayor who is also being investigated for the same corruption. So Bandung is
So,
practically in a autopilot mode.
Yeah, it's getting a bit long. Can you?
Oh yeah,
can
okay,
you sort
sorry.
of-
So I think if the answer is leadership, I don't think that will probably solve the problem. And also one more thing, we don't really
Wait a
see
minute, we really need to move on.
right.
There are a lot of other people who want to ask
on
questions.
coordination, because Bandung does not really have within boundaries waste management facility. So, Mbak Nur,
Okay,
what do you see of that? Right.
Okay. Well, we'll have to move on. I want to get one online question, and then we'll come. Oh, yeah, just one online question. They'll answer, and I will come back to you. Okay. Online question.
Oh, okay, thank you. So currently we have 100 plus people streaming online. There's a lot of questions, but one question from Laila Alfirdaus from Universitas Diponegoro, Semarang, specifically to Mas Yogi. Semarang is relatively collusious, but Handi is dominating, being a single candidate in local elections and won high votes. Could you please give us a pictures how this puzzle is shaped in the so-called politics of disaster policy? Can I have another?
Okay.
Okay. So there's one question from Zani Gobels from University of Queensland. To Mas Yogi, again, do you distinguish between tidal flooding such as that caused by ongoing land subsidence in northern and western Semarang and other types of flooding events? And second to Mbak Nur and also Mas Yogi, I'm wondering if there is any ongoing work in Surabaya exploring links between success in addressing flooding and managing waste that blocks drains. Thank you.
Okay, we'll give them a chance to answer, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, who wants to?
Maybe me? Yeah. Check. Yeah, thanks. I would like to respond to the online question, why Handi is so popular. So I think it's very interesting question, yeah, because it's represent now the trend in many local government leaders in Indonesia. They build their own persona through their own social media. So Handi use his own Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook to respond every comment, every complaint from the citizen in the city. So it's quite different with the Surabaya, because Surabaya use not personal account of the social media of the mayor, but use the independent commercial media to respond every complaint from this citizen. So it is why Handi, from my opinion, could be very popular, because they know that he can amplify, he can use his persona through this own social media to complain. So it's like, this is kind of clientelism 4.0, right? Using the IT to like, okay, I'm like the Santa Claus to will respond to every problems, and it is where you should complain to me, but not as a entity, as a in the local mayor institution, but as a personal. So I think that's become problem actually. And why it's so difficult to replicate the Surabaya performance in the floods management to the other city like Bandung. So like I already explained, so the social political dynamics, it's the contextual driver behind that. So it's like in a city that you can find the strong state-society linkage, the improvement toward the flood management, it can be easily happens. If you compare with the city that you cannot find the strong state-society linkage. And my definition about state-society linkage is it's not always the coalition between the state and the civil society activists, but more to give room to the public voice. I think because the civil society activists have so many works to do, maybe they also quite tired, but if you rely on the public voice, it's kind of give weapon to every people to complain, protest, and then if you already find the channels that go directly to the inside the city hall, it can be very effective. What next? Yeah. Is there any question that I miss? Okay. Oh yeah, yeah. Especially in Semarang, it's quite now. Yeah, in the mainstream geographical or mainstream disaster studies, it should be like there's kind of distinct. They try to distinguish between the tidal floodings and the river floodings. But in Semarang, somehow it's quite entangled because Semarang location is the north coastal city, and sometimes when the tidal flooding happens, the river stream cannot go to the ocean well. So it's like combination between the river flooding and tidal flooding that makes flooding in Semarang is very difficult to be contained.
Thank you for the questions. Why is it difficult to replicate Surabaya case? Yeah, even in my city in Jogja, I have Sultan, Mas. But still, even in my city, I'm academics from Gajah Mada University, but still. The problem again, that's why I highlight the importance of leadership commitment. And what I meant as a leader here is actually not only from the government leader, but also if we remember what Mustafa said yesterday, the NGO activist is also the key. Like in Jogja, there are lots of bank sampah. It was moved by NGO activists. It was moved by volunteers who wanted to make the area clean, and it happened. But of course, the speed of those movements compared to the speed of the way we produce waste is, like the earth and the sky. That's why I highlighted in my reflection that we really need to think about how to deal or how to shape waste prevention policy to work it better. And that's my, hopefully it answers your question, but don't worry, I think Bandung has a very strong social activism too, and we still have hope on that. Like Jogja. I remember during the waste crisis in Jogja, I got calls from some colleagues in my city, and Azizah, can you give me some suggestion? And I just said, oh, come on, even the Sultan cannot solve the problem. And how can I? I'm just the crumbs, Yeah, so that's the problem. So, but again, what I'm a leader here is not the government leader, but we can also talk about the NGO activists or other community leader. And is there a connection between waste management with flood management, like in Surabaya? I didn't really did a research on that, but in Surabaya, the management of the cleanliness is also include the rivers. So in every weeks, the city government through now it's part of the environmental agency, Dinas Lingkungan Hidup, they clean the river. Routine, very routine. Use like so many hard vehicle, they will just remove waste and other rubbish from the river, and I think that's also contribute to the flood management in the city. Thank you.
Okay. There was one more question over here from the floor. Is there a microphone for this lady? Okay.
Hello, good morning. I'm Elisa from Jakarta. My question will be for Pak Halley because it's about Jakarta and about traffic. So usually in mobility, we have either we use concept called avoid, shift, improve, or push on and pull demand, push and pull factor. I'm just wondering why in your proposed solution, is there any reason why you didn't put anything that relate to reduce driving? Yeah, okay, that's all.
Let's do this one more on the floor, and then we'll go to the online questions.
Hi, my question is also to Yudhistira.
to make it even. Also about transportation in Jakarta, I'm just wondering about public transportation. Actually, speaking of awards that Bu Azizah mentioned given to Surabaya, Jakarta actually already received award for its public transportation in 2021, and it's the first ever Southeast Asia city that received such award. And the award, just to be sure, is given by the International Transportation and Sustainable Transportation. It was given in Washington, D.C. And so my question here, how much is actually the challenge of sort of like improving public transportation usage in Jakarta is actually created by the lack of public transportation versus the impression that Jakarta has no public transportation? Because I feel that there is a combination of it, that there are so many like shared some assumptions that public transportation in Jakarta is non-existent or bad, but actually if we look around, there are so many options out there. So has there been any survey about what actually causes all these choices of transportation mode, as well as the kind of land use scale? Is it really, it seems that Jakarta is in the rankings, it surely is compared to London, Tokyo, it's comparable, right? The commuting pattern during the rush hour. So is this it? Is there something that has to do with also the land use and the distribution of the scale, the sheer scale of Jakarta? How much further can it improve actually with this scale if we're going on this way? Thank you.
Okay, let's do one online question, please.
Okay, so we have one question from Ji-won Kim from Johns Hopkins University, participating from Baltimore, to Mbak Nur Azizah. What do you think to be the motivations that drive CSR into waste reform? And what are the industries that are most active in waste reform through the CSR projects? Thank you.
Okay, so we'll let you guys answer those, and then there are a couple more I think that we'll try to pick up in the next, so try to make it, relatively brief because there's some more questions.
Okay, thank you. So initially I thought, okay, there is no questions, but so I tried to answer her question from Mbak Elisa and Mbak Rita. Okay, Mbak Rita jointly. I believe that this answer will not satisfy you well, but why? In my proposal, why I'm not including the push and pull demands? Well, I think the issue here is that having, for sure, that kind of policies like including that, okay, why don't you just put it there, invest more in public transport? Yeah, that's part of the strategy. But I think as long as we cannot see the something like Jakarta as a whole, like people like myself, like Pak Mustafa from Pamulang, from Tangsel, go to Jakarta every day, so that we need transportation network that beyond the administrative border, then I don't think Jakarta itself or even Depok, Bogor can solve it by themselves. So in that sense, maybe some of you noticed that our MRT stopped in Lebak Bulus, in the southern part of Jakarta. It started there and then it ends like in the central part of Jakarta. Why it's not covering beyond Lebak Bulus, southern Jakarta, connecting Tangerang or even connecting Depok? Why? Because it's part of the local Perumda, local subnational company, and they cannot extend it beyond their jurisdiction. So that's the issue that I want to bring here, that we have to solve this, because some of urban service issue in Indonesia, something like Jakarta, cannot be solved within the border area, administrative area. It should be solved beyond that administrative areas. So I think first thing first, once we have innovation like in institution, then I believe that having this cooperation better, not only coordination, but cooperation, building it together beyond this administrative area may partly solve the problem. For sure, there is no way we don't have congestion, but it's better transport, better traffic in Jabodetabek, in Jakarta metropolitan area. So for the Mbak Rita, yeah. Well, I personally just know that we got the award in 2021. Yeah, I don't think that. Sorry, my point is that yeah, Jakarta still have improvement in public transport, but I think, in my point of view, the current state, we have too much wasting resource in roads, too much congestion, so that people on average need like 3 hours for 2 until 3 hours for congestion, and it's spent in roads. I think perhaps if we have better public transport in railways, I think it will be much better, so that we for sure the congestion is moving from road to railways, but I think it will be better for the city like Jakarta with the size of 31 million. Maybe that's my answer.
Thank you for the question, Ji Won Kim. Sorry if I mispronounce the name. So, why CSR interested in doing being part of the waste management? So I interviewed like a representative. Like there is an association of companies who has program on waste management. I interviewed one of them, and they said that they want to involve in this program, in the waste management program. First, I just broadcast what they said. So the first, of course, is part of the responsibility, because part of the responsibility to give back to the community. But of course, it's much bigger than that. It's about branding. It's about branding because, and if I follow it correctly, among many companies who are interested in joining the waste management program, mostly multinational companies, which in their main company, they already follow the policy from the state they are in. Like Unilever, can I mention brand here? Like Unilever, Danone, like Coca-Cola and so, they have the CSR program on waste management simply because the central office said so. So that's part of the obligation from the central office, but also it's part of the responsibility because apparently they have a very big market in Indonesia. And in Indonesia, there is actually a regulation that pushed all companies to have like what's so-called as extended producer's responsibility. Actually, the law was established in 2008, but it was only implemented in 2021. And up to that year, it's only around 119 companies submitted their roadmap for risk prevention program to the Indonesian government. Thank you.
Okay, I'm afraid we're gonna have to stop now. We're over time. So I'm sorry that we didn't get some of the questions. There were some online. There was another one, at least from the floor. We're gonna have to stop. We're now ready for morning tea. It will be served outside. And I need to ask you to please try to return by 10:50. The next session will start at 10:50. So please try to return to your seats by then. Thank you.